Labor is ramping up attacks on the opposition leader Peter Dutton, accusing him of recklessness and endangering ties with Indonesia, in his response to the story over Russia's attempts to base military aircraft in Papua. The government says Indonesia has given them guarantees that no Russian planes will be permitted to be based in its territory. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedjets joins us now. Stephen, what did the opposition leader say yesterday and what's the political fallout today?
Yeah, Gemma, yesterday Peter Dutton was greeted with breaking news about this reported approach that was made by Russia to Indonesia to base these long-range aircraft out of Papua. Now, Peter Dutton's response was one that's worth going through. Yesterday, the opposition leader was basically trying to say the government had been caught unawares by this, and in that response he said that the government needed to explain whether it was aware of this approach before it was, quote, publicly announced by Indonesia's President Prabowo. Now, as Labor has pointed out this morning, the problem is the President made no such statement. He had not actually made any comment whatsoever. There were a few comments circulating from the Indonesian government, from spokespeople, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and from the Defence Ministry as well, essentially saying no comment or we're not really sure what's going on. But Prabowo himself had not breathed a word about this. And so perhaps unsurprisingly this morning, all of the government heavyweights who have done the rounds this morning are really taking aim at Peter Dutton, saying it was irresponsible for him to get this wrong. Penny Wong is accusing him of fabricating, in her words, a statement by President Prabowo. Both she and Richard Marles, the Defence Minister, are saying it's proof of his recklessness and the fact that he's not fit to lead. Let's take a listen to the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, speaking about this on News Breakfast earlier today.
Peter Dutton fabricated a statement by the Indonesian President. Now, this is an extraordinary thing for a man who wants to be the Prime Minister to do, to actually try and verbal the President of Indonesia in order to make a domestic political point.
Okay, so what has the coalition had to say in response to that?
Well, Gemma, we haven't heard yet from Peter Dutton himself, although I imagine we will very soon. But a few coalition frontbenchers have been out this morning talking about this story and talking about the opposition leader's response. James Patterson, the campaign spokesperson, essentially said that Peter Dutton was greeted or was trying to deal with breaking news. And he said he wouldn't take lectures from the government on this, given it had got so many things wrong itself on national security issues. Another coalition source I spoke to this morning conceded that the opposition leader did in fact make a mistake, an error, but he said that it was simply due to the fact that the coalition was trying to deal with breaking news and it wanted to make the point more broadly that it felt that Labor hadn't been sufficiently aware of what was going on. I'm not sure if those answers will be sufficient, and I suspect that the opposition leader is going to get a bit more heat on this today. But of course, the opposition is trying to turn around this story not so much onto what Peter Dutton did or didn't say yesterday, and more about the actual substance of the story, in particular, exactly what the nature of this request from Russia was, when was it made, what level was it made at, and what did the government know about it.
As to the substance of that story, do we know for sure if Russia did in fact make this request, or is that still unclear?
Look, honestly, at this stage, it's unclear, Gemma. It's worth noting that when the Foreign Minister and the Defence Minister did the rounds this morning, they were very careful not to say that this story was a complete fabrication. They did not say in any of their interviews that they did not believe that any request had been made, and certainly they weren't going to put those words in the mouths of their Indonesian counterparts. All they said was that Indonesia had made it very clear that any suggestion it would say yes to such a request was fake or was not accurate. But of course, the original story wasn't that Indonesia was on the brink of allowing Russia to do this. The original story was simply that a request had been made. Now, I've been told that the Indonesian Defence Minister made it clear to Richard Marles yesterday that he had not seen such a request, but that does not preclude the possibility that the request was lodged at a more junior level. And of course, this comes across the backdrop of tightening defence ties between Indonesia and Russia, naval exercises late last year, and Russia's clear and stated intention to expand its military footprint in the Indo-Pacific. In 2017, as we were discussing yesterday, it in fact flew two bombers out of this very base on an intelligence gathering mission. So the history here is clear. It does sound increasingly like some sort of approach was made, but the most important thing is that Indonesia has nipped this in the bud and said even if there was a request, its answer to it would be no.